Today we are here to discuss a very important topic, the public health data. I know many people in this audience want to work with public health data and are wondering how to go about this. And today you will have the opportunity to hear from several experts who have been working in this domain. So I'm very happy to invite our experts for today. The first expert, Mr. Rajiv Sadanandan. Sir, may I request you to come on the stage? He is currently the CEO of Health System Transformation Platform. It's a think tank which works on the health system and policy research. He has extensive experience with the public health. He worked as a Secretary of Kerala State, CEO of Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, and during the COVID pandemic, he was advisor to Chief Minister of Kerala on management of COVID. And specifically, I want to mention that he set up India's first EHR for any state health system, which is called eHealth Kerala. Next, I would like to invite our panelist, Mr. Rahul Pandey, who is a Senior Operations Officer in the World Bank Health System, World Bank's Health, Nutrition and Population Global Practice South Asia. He's based in New Delhi, and he has previously also worked with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare as lead consultant, and he's a focal point for digital health in World Bank India office and provides support to several countries in designing and rolling out the digital health interventions. Next panelist we have is Dr. Prashant Mathur, my former colleague and a good friend. He's director of ICMR, National Center for Disease Informatics and Research, which is, by the way, in Bangalore. For those of you who don't know, it is pretty close to the airport. And this center is really a center of excellence, working on epidemiology, patterns of care, survival studies on cancer, stroke, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and risk factors. He has published more than 120 papers in the peer-reviewed publication, and he serves on several important committees. And finally, I'm very happy to invite Ms. Rukmini S. She is founder of a startup called Data for India, which is a public platform to expand the understanding of India through data. Rukmini's earlier journalistic work focused on inequality, gender, caste, and politics. She was also the national data editor of Hindu and HuffPost and has written on a range of topics. But what really makes me understand Rukmini's work better is her book, which I would strongly recommend you all should read. It's called Whole Numbers and Half-Truth, What Data Can and Cannot Tell Us About Modern India. It was recently published and has won several awards and distinctions. So without wasting any further time, I think I'll get started with today's panel because we are running late from the morning session. The thing is that the panel has extensive experience, and I would like to ask them many questions. But given the time, we have to see how we can get the best messages across while being conscious of the time. So let me begin with Mr. Rajiv. So, sir, in your experience, you have been in the government in several key positions. How do you see the evolution of digital systems in India? As you know, we have seen that transition going from paper-based system to digital systems, and specifically Kerala being a leader in healthcare and also being a leader in taking a digital approach to setting up the health system. Your experience with setting up eHealth platform and also other national programs. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pradeep. Let me start with with this notion that data in health started getting used after the digital technology came into being. That's not true. As a trainee, when I sat with the district health unit and I sat through the review, it was really enlightening to see the way they were using data. They had exactly the number of children who were born on a certain date, which vaccine was due at a certain time, and on the family planning front, they had the number of people who were eligible for sterilization and so on. In fact, the whole business of health sector had been and even now being run through the digital system. So that's why when I became health secretary for the second time in Kerala, one of the things that was troubling me was that an A&M used to maintain 23 registers. Now I realize, working with other states, that's less. I saw a state in which she maintains 55 registers. So the poor lady, in addition to doing her work, is entering data. So I had this, this grand vision of coming up with a IT-enabled architecture, and that's how I designed the Kerala's e-health program. And when I look back, I'm really embarrassed at the mistakes that I made in designing that program. So in order to avoid that you make the same mistakes when you work, I would like to lay down a few principles that I learned from my work. One is, collect only the data that will be used. This is digitally your temptation to put in this data, that data, which the mistake that I made. So collect only the data that will be used. Second, the people who provide that data and the people who collect that data have the first charge on that data, something that again gets ignored. How does a patient benefit? How does a health worker benefit? That's the next question that we need to ask when we design our architecture and our method. The third one is, again, something should be very elementary, but often forgotten is, if I collect the data, I should get the feedback on the data I've collected. So the feedback loop should be completed. It gets completed at my level, ideally at the patient's level, but at least at the health worker's level, that loop should be completed. And finally, I feel silly saying this, but as far as possible, avoid duplicating collection of data through digital and manual modes. Some of you may laugh, but trust me, it still happens even now. So that is the kind of these are the principles that we should bear in mind when we look for it. And finally, what I mentioned before, which is, how do you help the patient? How do you help the patient experience? And even now, within the data systems that are available, and Rahul will take you through some of the data collection methodology and the data sets that are available, even within the data sets that are available today, it is possible to create that value for the client. Let me illustrate. The National Health Authority, which I heard someone talk about it yesterday, handles the PMJY, the Pradhan Mantri Arogya Yojana, that's the health insurance program. They have data on claims. Now let's take some of these items and then if we can do a feedback loop. A lot of those cases, if you look, when you look at the data, we find the claims are for dialysis. Now dialysis comes out of chronic kidney disease, and that is when you are not manage your diabetes well. Government of India, under the Ayushman Bharat, also has a diabetes management program. So what prevents us from creating a feedback loop from the claim data on the dialysis, on CKD, and then linking that to the primary care program, and they are creating a positive loop. Secondly, similarly for stroke, it comes because you don't handle your hypertension. So if you are able to exchange this data, you will not only improve the value for the client, but also for the system. And then once I have an incident of, let's say, myocardial infarction or cancer, I need the follow-up treatment. Now that data should go back to the primary care provider, who then has to be trained on how to manage my complications, the post-episode complications. It also has to get linked to my inventory to see whether drugs that I need for my rehabilitation are available. So using the current data, it is still possible for us to create that thing that benefit the patient. Now, how to help the worker? When she goes to a village, what does she need? She needs to know, who are the children I have to immunize today? Who are the TB patients I have to follow up? Who are the NCD patients I have to follow up? That data should be available to her. Right now, she writes it out on a piece of paper and takes it. That data should be available to her on a dashboard. So my request to any of you who work on this is, please keep the the individual and the health worker in mind when you design your data. And please keep in mind the principles that I mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajiv. I think that was really setting the stage very well, because we are struggling with multiple portals and registers, and those of you, I don't know if you have ever been to the field, you can see how much our healthcare workers are struggling on one hand, and on the other hand, we are not getting good quality data to analyze and make our policies. So moving to Rahul. Rahul, you have worked with several digital systems, I know, across the country, also at the national level. So how do you see the when this transition happened from paper to digitalization, how the process has been, and what have you observed as some of the, let's say, the progress side of it, and then the challenge side of it? I know the challenges are bigger, but I think it's also important for us to understand the progress that we have made.
Thank
Over
you,
to you, Rahul.
Prabdeep. I think the challenges side, we should have whole day to talk. So probably I'll try to cover a few in 5 minutes I have, right? First of all, thank you so much for having me here in this symposium. I think the theme around what has been identified about effective sharing is something very important and critical, and the challenges also the symposium has very clearly identified. Before I delve into the subject, I just want to highlight that the World Bank itself has been very strong advocate of data agenda for many years, and later on, probably the next round of questions, I'll share some of that as well. And an important dimension of that is data governance, and primarily it is about internal governance mechanism, which institutional governance fall under that is very important. And the second is about the robust practices. I think those are very critical. And as we go further, I think probably we delve into the legislation, the policy framework, and all of that, that becomes very critical. My association with digitization, now we call out talking about digitalization, but digitization when it started happening in the public health sector in India was around 2006 or 7 when Ministry of Health for the first time started building something called Health Management Information System. And some of you, those who want to work in the sector, should also learn a little bit about the DHIS, which at that point in time was being implemented and is currently also available, but that became the basis for the discussion for HMIS. It was designed was a very complex process because you move from paper-based to analog-based, and I think probably at some point in time, I'll also request Mr. Rajiv to come in on this, health being a state subject, while federal government also sets up certain processes and standards and guidelines, and how that sometimes helps, but most time also complicates how the digitization or digitalization now will work into that process. Another challenge has been to manage expectation of the policymaker sometime, where digitalization has been considered as a solution for every problem existing in the health sector. While it is just an enabler, it's not a solution in itself. And I think that's something we should keep in mind as we go ahead and have further conversations on this topic, because as you work in this sector, there'll be many players that you bring one typical solution and we find that, okay, this is going to resolve every problem, say in tuberculosis or NCD or malaria or infectious diseases, which is not the case. Having said that, there has been some really good progress in the last 15 years or so. I think if you start working, there is Health Management Information System, there's a infectious disease tracking system, now it's called IHIP, there is an NCD tracking system. There has been some good progress on the vaccination supply chain and the tracking and creating duly. I think that has been one of the good examples in our country, which was later used during the COVID period as well to develop the CoWIN platform. The telemedicine has worked to large extent and reaching out to the far-flung areas as well. However, because of this perceived value that digital systems can solve everything, there has been mushrooming of thousands of literally tools and systems. We mapped in Kerala, sir, as well, and also in a couple of other states. In almost every state, we get the health department is having roughly around 40 to 50 digital solutions working, duplication of load of entering data and all of that also come into the picture. And I think now the time has come that we work on interconnectedness of these systems. But one caution I want to put in over here, there are examples within the country where the policymakers tried to create a single integrated system and suddenly they didn't have anything. Because while making that interconnected system, you broke some of the existing working independent siloed system, and suddenly there is nothing available to really provide for and feed data into the system. I think this is going to be a very important point, that we need to create those interoperable platforms, but at the same time make sure that legacy systems somehow get connected to it so that you don't necessarily break everything which is functioning. And then suddenly you are in air and thinking about, okay, our perfect system will come in 10 years and then we'll start collecting and holding the data into the system. Digitalization in India has certainly helped a lot in tracking progress. I think there has been some good kind of progress made on the tracking coverage, tracking some kind of equity measures in place. And also during COVID, as I mentioned earlier, we really saw some use of tools and system for even things like community surveillance, where you are picking up information, what is happening at the community level through social medias and all, and how exactly that has been working. There has been a couple of examples of tracking individual beneficiaries, like maternal child tracking system. You go on nutrition side, there's something called earlier ICDS Common Application Software, then Poshan Tracker, where you track every individual. There are very state-specific systems like eHealth. Kerala has some mechanism. There is Shally and the public health app. Tamil Nadu has something called PHR. Gujarat has something called TECO. I think all of that have been really working on that aspect very clearly. However, what we need to also understand that data could be a double-edged sword as well. Like while there is a case for, and this is something I would recommend some of you who are interested to read a little bit more on this. There is a World Development Report 2021 was done by the World Bank on this. And while there is a potential for creating huge social and economic values, we also know how the potential misuse or even the attacks, the cybersecurity aspects and all of that also come into the picture. So I think being responsible in terms of designing the architecture itself also becomes very critical, and having those policy frameworks which support those kind of aspects. We talked about the DPD in the morning. Yeah. And I think last point I just want to mention about in this particular response is the quality of the data. We are working very hand in hand with some of the governments, but the timeliness, accuracy, and correctness of the data, I think that becomes a huge challenge because of multitudes of systems, the parallel systems in place, and then what do you really analyze? Are you analyzing the poor quality data? Then the result which we will achieve and we'll also put in the policy framework is also going to be very kind of a shady kind of a work, if I can use that term. And probably we'll come in the next round and talk about some other aspects as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul. I think I really want to take that very, very important statement you made. Digitalization is not a solution for everything. I think since we have got this idea and we want to build these portals which are complex and which have every information possible, and it is believed that that's going to solve the problems. But by now, 15 years, many of us have been involved with the digital health initiatives. I can tell you that it has not solved many other problems. So I think looking at health system holistically and seeing where the digital or the information system fit in is important. So moving a little bit away from the health system to the research landscape in India. So Dr. Mathur, you lead the Cancer Registry Program, which is, I think, one of the best databases available in India. And I think it's one of the best cancer registry database for any LMIC in the world. So how do you think that the research data systems have improved in terms of how we collect data, how we analyze, how we share, and how these data sets help in decision making and are being managed? Over to you. You can also broadly touch on, because you're representing ICMR, so how ICMR views these data platforms. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prabdeep, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this very important event. The ICMR set up the National Cancer Registry Program in 1981, and it's been around 43 years as the only disease registry in India. There is no other disease registry. And yes, we are proud that we are the largest in the Southeast Asia and perhaps in most of the LMICs. And we contribute a lot of data to the Global International Agency for Research on Cancer, WHO, and other partners, organizations also. India was the first country to have a national cancer control plan way back in 1975. But it took years to set up the registry. Whereas in the good parts of the world, the registry comes first, the program comes later. But anyway, we are on track now. So we receive data from almost more than 8,500 sources of registration in the country, and these include hospitals, tertiary care, secondary care, nursing homes, laboratories, anybody who has anything to do with cancer. In terms of its diagnosis, its treatment, and also a very large part is collecting death information. Because if you don't close the loop on mortality, then it becomes an incomplete story. And now, efforts to link it with cancer screening programs. So we would like epidemiological data, we would like good demographic data, we would like diagnostic data, even including genomics, omics, other laboratory parameters, the large insurance data, because a lot of good quality data comes. We receive almost 24 lakh records per year, and most of them are duplicates. Because cancer is a chronic disease. Patients consult multiple hospitals across the country. And if you keep counting each one of them, then you count cancer 5 times. So a large chunk of our work goes in removing duplicates, for which we need good identifiers, reliable indicators to pinpoint that these are. Then we also provide information on incidence of cancer, long-term outcomes, survival. So there is compared to many other data systems which you see, which are service provider oriented, which will help you to monitor programs. This registry will help you not only programs, but also look at the biology part of the disease. There are a lot of hypotheses generated. Why is this so? For every why, there is another set of why. And it stimulates a lot of research. So registries is very different from the health management information system or registers, because a lot of investment of ours goes into quality maintenance, and which includes a lot of training, retraining, and looking at the quality checks before the data is published and put out in public domain. And this triggers a lot of discussions around entire research ecosystem. How can we make large research data sets reliable, correct, and complete? And in the late 1990s, we started using electronic methods of data collection, where no such discussions were happening in the country. When the National Digital Blueprint was created, you will find mention of the cancer registry. So we do give a lot of inputs into the digitization which is happening, and people learn from those experiences as to how the utilization of data is primarily by the government, but a lot of other stakeholders, particularly industry, uses these results of the registry to, for various purposes, whether it is drug development or other interventions. And yet cancer is not a notified disease in India, unlike many other developed countries. There are only 16 states, now 17 states, who have notified cancer as a notified disease. Otherwise, on voluntary basis, it becomes extremely difficult to run large data sets without official data linkages from government and non-governmental departments. So there is ICMR has taken a lot of importance into bringing all research data sets into one. So there is a initiative to set up data center of ICMR, where all ICMR funded project data will be put up for anybody to use. So these systems are being put in place. Although patchily it is done, but as a holistic thing, we are working on that. Once we have these kind of data systems, it will be very easy for somebody to access those data sets.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mathur. That was very helpful, and I really hope we make quick progress on that. And I can also tell you there are a lot of people in this audience who might be willing to volunteer in helping set up those data exchange platforms, because that's a lot of expertise in the room. Moving to Rukmini. Rukmini, so you come from a world where you are looking out for data and you want to make use of it, you want to analyze and disseminate it to the public so they can understand India better. I'm a big fan of your work myself. So what challenges do you face in accessing this data as a data journalist? And do you feel that you are able to access data sets where you are able to make meaningful conclusions? Or how do you think your job can be made easier? Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me here. Um, there is the job of collecting the data, and then, as you've mentioned, the job of communicating it, which I did first as a data journalist, then a little in my book, and now for the public platform that I run called Data for India. The job of data communicators, of course, a large part of it is about accessing that data, and I'll talk about that. But there is also the element of knowing how to communicate it, and especially when it comes to health data, there can be a lot of fear among communicators because you don't want to get it wrong. So just want to start by mentioning that 3 of the 4 people on this panel are people who I spoke to during the pandemic as a data journalist, who helped me make great sense of the data that I was looking at and allowed me to do a better job of communicating that data. So even to the research, scientific, and maybe even the industry communities, I would say that reaching out and sort of, developing partnerships with communicators, whether they are journalists or others, helps, make information more widely available to everyone and sort of reduces the friction or the antagonistic relationship that can sometimes develop to what I hope is, the greater good for everyone. So this is a nice reunion, some of whom I'm meeting in person for the first time. When it comes to the data sets that one typically accesses for looking at health data in India, I would broadly split them into survey data and administrative data. So the survey data that I've used, I continue to use and used a lot in the book as well, typically comes from the National Sample Survey around questions around spending, especially out-of-pocket expenditure and other household level expenditure on healthcare. Also from the National Family Health Survey, which really, is the bedrock of our understanding about women's health, fertility, nutrition, other questions. Similarly, the Longitudinal Aging Survey, an aging survey of India, which we are excited to start using, which also comes from IIPS, is going to be a good future source, again, of survey data. And then we have the data that comes broadly from the Registrar General of India family. So I would say the SRS, the CRS, which we use to talk about health as well. These have been, and I'll come to that in a minute, but these have been broadly available, and there have been, in fact, improvements in access to survey data. So unit level data from the NSS is now more easily available than ever before, and the NSS makes outreach to help communicators communicate that better. But I would say survey data, which is really the part of this ecosystem that's developing very fast, is the one that we have the most challenge accessing. Now, under survey data, many things and many of the speakers here deal with parts of it. So there are registries, there is data that is out, related to schemes. And all of this, I understand there are, of course, first of all, the purpose of this data is to help people in government do their job better. So I understand that the primary user, the first right to it is not necessarily of the communicator, but given how interlinked, strong, powerful these administrative data sets are getting, we would like very much to be able to access and use the data better. Now, access to this data typically comes mediated through either an aggregate, an annual report, a press release, that sort of thing. And for a data communicator, it's never going to be satisfying to be seeing what is the outcome of great filtration and then finally something that's presented to us. It's not satisfying to work with. While there are concerns about privacy that are important and must be taken care of before it is made available to us, I think there's also a question, there are technical aspects, but there's also an attitudinal aspect, which is you do have to bring some sense of remove from the data if you're going to be okay with people using it and writing about it. Of course, it has to be accurate, but you cannot mediate it through an annual report or a press release. So there is that, I would say, maturity of the ecosystem that needs to happen for that. Beyond this, I don't want to talk only, I don't want to place the locus of responsibility on the government system alone. Yeah. And I want to mention the role here of big tech companies to whom we have, willingly handed over so much of our data, including around things like Google searches for health conditions or Google mobility data. Now, I don't want to make the claim that this is something that a private citizen has a right to. However, I do think that there are ways in which we can come together for some sort of compact and make the public good case. And Google clearly saw it during the pandemic when they made Google mobility data available to help planning even for district collectors. So I do, and I think Bangalore is a good place to have that discussion, where this public spiritedness among the tech community really is something that I see. So I do hope that there is some way we can come together to build compacts with big tech on this. And then finally, I just want to give one example of data that is not at all high tech. And in some ways is the opposite end of the spectrum, but it's what you do when nothing else is available. And this was an example from Kerala during the pandemic, and I write about it in the book as well, where it was a way of building an accountability mechanism. So the government was producing its daily bulletin about deaths and cases of COVID, but a group of doctors from across the state, and these are local doctors who know their community very well. They run a nursing home and they know everybody in the neighborhood. All they did is they built a Google spreadsheet, and they would list the names of people who they knew in their community had died from COVID, or they would look at it in obituaries, and sometimes these were even billboards put up in the community. And they would list them as COVID deaths and check if they were being listed in the bulletin as well. So it was a sort of extremely low-tech, bootstrapped accountability mechanism that I think also has a role to play in accessible data.
Thanks, Rukmini. I think you really made the point that we keep asking government, give us data, give us data. How about the big tech, right? We are actually contributing data in many ways, but are we getting it out? I think it's a question for people out here. I'm sure we have industry representatives as well. But taking this conversation forward, because a lot of researchers really want to analyze data. So is there something we can look at the government data as a public good and make it accessible? I understand that we need to put all the privacy checks and controls, and we need to sort of now align with the DPDP Act and so on. But let's say we have ways to do that. So I think how we should be thinking around it. First, over to you, sir, because you were in the driver's seat. How you would have seen as a health secretary if any of these researchers came to you and asked that I want to analyze your data?
Remember, data leads to transparency. And transparency is not always welcome. Because if they are doing well, of course, you would like to tom-tom it. They don't need anyone to analyze. You will claim it anyway. But if you're not doing well, then that is something. One of the things in 2016 when I told my minister was that one thing you should let me do is let me be transparent with the data. Because China hid SARS in 2001 and the world paid for it. China again hid it in 2019 and the world paid for it. So one of the important things in doing, in handling an epidemic is to be transparent about the data. But Kerala was transparent, barring that one which was a big mistake, which was Kerala hid some of the deaths, which I had advised against, and we paid for it, but then they rectified it. But because of that, the Kerala government took a lot of political flack. In 2017, when we were handling the worst, dengue epidemic, and not only Kerala, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, they were all handling it. It was only Kerala that was reporting the data, and I took the flack for it because, so the question is, there's a cost to transparency, there's a political cost to transparency, which you need to be aware of. Now, on a positive side, how can data analyzers help the government? The important thing, not only for this, any researcher who wants to influence policy, what you need to do is to prove our utility. We worked with the government that was complaining, in my new role, we worked with the government that was complaining of the lack of financial support. We asked them, are you willing to share the data with us? So they let us have access to the entire financial reports. And we were able to demonstrate to them that the problem was not with finances, but the problem was with management. So now we sit with their finance department, because we become trusted partners. So the important thing to do is to generate that trust and that utility by working with the government and demonstrating that we bring value to what you do. And once you earn that trust, then you are in.
Thank you.
I hope
And
you.
Rahul, that's a very important point. I think many of us as researchers or as people who want to work with the data, we think that the job is easy on the other side, but it's not. So as much as we know, when the governments don't share data, it is sometimes a very difficult situation for those who are actually making those decisions, even though they in principle might want to. But they also face challenges. So Rahul, given your experience of working with many government programs, are there ways we can make data more accessible?
So probably I'll put 3 points. One, there are silver linings. First, let's start with a little bit of positive. A few states, at least, which we have been associated with, there has been this at least effort of kind of trying to put some data in the public domain. Not everything is available currently, but those decisions are being made, and slowly probably those, in those few, I don't want to take the names of those states because then they will come that we haven't yet like put in the public, you are already going ahead and talking about it. But there have been efforts which are going in this direction. But these are very episodic. I think we need to understand that this federal versus a state relationship where health is a state subject and federal government also has a role to play. There are a lot happens between those missing kind of communication gap which happens. But the ABDM, Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, for those who kind of know this initiatives of the federal government, I think has started thinking in that direction. There is still a long way to go, but they started thinking on not creating digital solutions, but having those provider, the facility, and the unique identifiers for individual, those registries in place. And also what they are trying to push a bit on that is having this information exchange with consent management. You go to Nordic countries, consent is given. This is a trust-based society. But here, I think with everything else, the political issues, the civil society, the Supreme Court, all of that comes into some kind of that there is no misuse. So the consent management and the registries of the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission will certainly help in that direction. But it's a long way to go because, again, the health being a state subject comes in the picture, and each state wants to have their own flexibilities, and that rightly so. So all of that at some point in time politically need to be dealt with. The next point I just want to make that all of this will be possible, our learning says even globally, there are two fundamentals. One is the policy or the legislative framework which needs to be in place, because sharing the data, as the Surveyor General of India was mentioning in the morning, that monetizing is one aspect, but how do you really share, in what format, where you bundle, who is standardizing those data, how do we make sure that the data remains in that kind of environment where it is not being misused for personal gains. All of that will require some kind of policy and legislative framework. It will not happen vacuum. The ad hocism will continue. And the second point is we need very high quality digital public infrastructure to make sure that no one has to manually kind of work on weeding out all the duplication and everything. There are systems in place. And I just want to put one last thought on the table, which is not related to use of data, but anything. It is in general the principle. What is happening right now, someone is providing service delivery. That service delivery is getting converted into data points. Someone is picking that data point, entering into some other system, and someone else is using it. All of that, like electric loss in transmission, there is a lot of loss. Till the time we don't create service delivery point itself in the data points, which automatically gets into the system where then there is no loss in between, I think we will also have this quality issue will continue to happen, and the secondary use will always be compromised a little bit on the routine data system, which is coming from our programs. Thank you.
You want to add your thoughts on how ICMR is, you said that ICMR is making efforts to make data more accessible. Would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, so continuing with that, first of all, we recognize that publicly funded research has to go back to the public. And this is a thought process across all government funded research. Systems are being put in place. So there is a bend which has to be overcome, and that is even investigators need to agree to share the data. Sometimes there are publication issues. They don't want to share it till they have fully saturated all publications that they can think of. And we don't know what is the time period, whether it is 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years. But also putting in requirements for funding research where you give an undertaking that yes, you agree to put your data after completion in a public domain. So those are the efforts which are underway, and I do hope that we will see these changes very soon.
I hope I'm audible. Yeah, I think that's a very positive step, and I really hope we make progress. Look, me coming to you, you as a user of data, what will be your wish list on what the various organizations can do to make it more accessible? Yeah.
So I think if we're thinking of the the best case scenario, the gold standard being, say, APIs or full open access, even if we were to talk about something in the middle, what I want to caution against is a dashboardization that I sometimes see across government departments, schemes. Let me instead put it in a positive way. So the problem with the dashboard is not that it can be an effective tool for communication, but if the dashboard ends there and there's nothing behind it accessible, then it's a pretty face and not much more. But we know that we have positive examples of doing both, and some of these again don't come from government. So in the pandemic, we had a purely pro bono volunteer-driven effort called COVID19India.org that was, again, a lot of the energy came from Bangalore. These were completely anonymous young people who came together on a Telegram group on a volunteer basis, and all they did was aggregate government data. These were bulletins being produced by state governments but were not available. And so it was a lovely dashboard which people enjoyed looking at, as much as anyone could have enjoyed anything in the pandemic. But the full data behind it was available for download through CSV's APIs as well, and became a great tool for the research community, not just for people with a casual interest. So dashboard plus a backend is if we're not talking about open APIs, at least let's talk about that. And the second point I want to make is we should be able to have reasonable expectations of frequency from any data set. And we have had a couple of notable pauses, which then produce great uncertainty in the user community, and then we're not sure about whether we can use these going forward. So during the pandemic as well, one of the data sources that we used, and really is such a rich source. Of course, the quality is debatable, but it's been a valuable asset, is the HMIS data, which is not currently publicly accessible, and without us really knowing why. And one should be able to have a reasonable expectation of being able to see data that we used before. Similarly, there's been a long pause in SRS data. I personally, when people are looking for things like cause of death, if they're looking at data from overseas, I personally encourage people to use Indian government-produced data. We at Data for India consciously do not use the IHME global burden of disease because we feel it is heavily modeled with assumptions that are not clear. We would much rather use SRS, even if it isn't, even if they cannot tell you how many cases of chikungunya were in this district in Gujarat, that's okay. We'll give up that level of, and that level of granularity is unreasonable, which IHME claims to do. We would rather use SRS. If we ourselves are willing to be, nationalistic on using data, then we should have a reasonable expectation that it doesn't suddenly pause.
No, I think that's a very important point, that continuity is important, so we are able to see over a period of time. So I think that takes me to an important issue. So one of the challenge that, I as a public health researcher and also as an implement researcher have seen is that we have built many platforms, we have started collecting a lot of data, but many of these are not user-centric. These have been designed by tech companies sitting in their boardrooms. Quite often they have never gone to field and seen who is collecting this data, how is this fitting into the workflow. And hence we end up collecting a lot of data, but when it comes to, let's say, people like us, and we say, no, I can't make any sense of it because one, sometimes it's not the most important variable which has been collected. And the secondly, what happens is the user, I think this point was brought earlier, sees it as a burden, and hence they have to put something in there and they put it in there. And so how do we shift from these mega platform thinking to more agile, more simple user-centric systems, even though we may get, finding that right balance of quantity and quality. So either Rahul or Rajiv, sir, you can respond to this. Yeah. since you are involved in building these platforms?
So this is my favorite topic, in fact. Many times what happens that a solution is built and then that is brought, okay, take this solution, this is solve your problem of XYZ in the health sector. And those solutions, I don't blame anyone because those solutions are built with the right intent. Someone has thought about solving a particular problem, and I think that's good. But I think the solutions should not come before the logic of what we want to solve. I think that's something we miss quite a lot. And we have a few examples where we tried to jump into designing a particular digital tool to help a particular problem. It ended up being a kind of Christmas tree finally because you realized after 2 days, oh, we are not probably addressing this aspect. I personally have two experiences. One in India itself, in 2015-16, we built something with Ministry of Women and Child Development, something called ICDS Common Application Software. Unfortunately, for political reasons, it got transitioned to something else. I would not get into that. But there, one of the questions everyone asked, the Anganwadi workers who are at the front, most of the earlier Anganwadi workers either are not literated or very semi-literated. How exactly are they going to use the fundamentals of a digital technology? And we, in fact, invested 6 months of just talking to them in 4 different phases to make sure they understand what is being built for them. They understand how they were using the register and how exactly that can be done in the technology. And to everyone's surprise, in fact, that was independently assessed and evaluated as well. To everyone's surprise, most of the Anganwadi workers who had in their life never held even a feature phone, they were able to do that, and because what that was eliminating the need for feeding the data after service has been provided. That was service delivery, job aid given to those frontline workers to make sure they don't have to do their job again and again after putting the register. So that's something, making trust in them and having them come on board was really helpful. The second example we have from a very similar experience in Nigeria, where the frontline workers and the community at the front, like the providers at the front, were brought in as a beta tester for the entire system of health information system, where their inputs were very proactively taken in account. And that was first of its kind in the country, and now it is being considered as a success model primarily because the user who are going to be there were put in the center. So last point on this, it is very important to understand the logic of what we are planning to solve, and not necessarily what kind of fancy digital tool we are wanting to create in that ecosystem.
You want to add on from your experience and what you think should be the way forward in building more user-centric systems?
I think Rahul has covered that part. That is, one problem that we found when we were talking to the ANMs when we designed the system was for them to formulate their requirement in a language that the people who are writing the program could do. So that's a translation, lost in translation kind of issue that we deal with. But and bringing in the user, bringing in the ANM as the user acceptance tester is again extremely useful. And we must have the patience, because if they did not formulate it correctly in the past, they have the right to ask for it to be reworked, and once that is done, I think it'll become user friendly.
Yeah, so thank you. I think that's a really important thing. We co-design our systems, then we can get good quality data, which we can then do all the beautiful analysis we want. And I think
Don't be too sure. It'll be a lot of iterations will happen. Nothing is going to happen just like that. You will have to have patience. You'll have to keep reworking and then getting it done.
And I think another important thing we have learned is the offline first versus online system. The offline first, like, we have WhatsApp, we can keep writing, it syncs whenever we get internet. So using these kind of tools seem to work much better on the ground than the direct online tools, because most of the direct online tools seem to be failing as far as I know. So now coming to the most important final question on AI. How do you think AI is going to impact public health data, both in terms of collection, analysis, interpretation? So let me begin with Dr. Mathur, since you are sitting on a gold mine of data. So how do you see, you think AI will be coming into your workflow?
Yeah, certainly AI is very much there and will be needed at a much rapid pace than what it is currently being seen. Data requirements for AI will have to balance between quantum and quality. And we know that bad quality input will give bad quality output also. So there is a lot of challenge around overcoming standardization of data sets. Research data, even research data needs to be standardized. So how metadata should be standardized, etc., should be well thought of. Simple thing, hemoglobin, how you report, what units you use, blood pressure, what units you use, everything matters to an AI, for an AI use. The research data, since it is well collected, well curated data, will be of immediate benefit for use of AI. And that can be very well correlated with the routine survey data, administrative data, or real world data, as we say, that which is collected routinely. So people will also need to guide data collection procedures. So the user also has to say how data collection should be fine-tuned. What is it that is not making sense? What is it giving trouble? Otherwise, let loose, because the person who's collecting data has a purpose, which may not fulfill the other's need. So this dialogue has to be a constant one between the provider and the user.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. So really, I feel that AI tools initially should actually start using research data before we move to health system data. But in terms of health system data, you have any thoughts, Rahul or yourself, Mr. Rajiv, how AI could be an enabler?
No, I'm really excited when I see the large language models, the way they are able to take data from. I don't think the standardization is as much of a problem as designing an LLM that can read many of these data and then make sense out of it. And what little I've seen of it, it's extremely exciting. I would like to see the day in which my model can read the appendixes that are attached to different research journals, combined with the journalistic data. Social media might be too much of a nightmare, but journalistic data is not that difficult. So how do you scrape all this data, bring it together, make sense out of it? And I hope that we are able to design or develop an LLM that can deal with many of the issues that we are working with. And I'm very optimistic and looking forward to the time when we will have people who understand the systems, working along with the people who need the information to develop a language that can actually address his needs.
I think just one point, we need to train AI before AI tells us anything. And I think that's where I would say that a large responsibility on those who are working on AI modeling is also what we are feeding that model and where exactly that the feed is coming from. And I think what we are seeing, we are in an era of 10 years back when everyone was developing an HMIS. Now everyone comes back with an AI model to find a solution. I think I'm very excited. I think this is something I really am very interested, but I also wonder that how much is the feedback loop is available to train that model itself, and the model is a self-learning model, or is a model need to be trained by doing something in that entire process. So I think the time will tell how exactly we get through this, but AI's time is there. We cannot really ignore it, and we need to find a way to make it work for our good use.
Sure. You want to add on, Rukmini, anything?
Yes, I think even in the Government of India's broader AI mission, the statements towards the data community, the government data ecosystem, has been that the data should not just be AI readable, it should be AI understandable. I feel like taking one step before that and saying that is what we would like right now as well. And the point that you made about metadata is really the one that I feel most strongly about. We are hampered in so much of the analysis that we want to do because of challenges around metadata, and just purely making sense of the metadata takes months of work sometimes, even with a system as good as the National Sample Survey. So it only seems like a step that will help us non-intelligent beings currently, and then will help AI too. But yeah, my big push to anybody working with any data set is to just go big on metadata. You can't, there's nothing you can lose by just putting in more information about every indicator.
Yeah. Thanks, Rukmini. I think that's an important point. I think my colleague, Dr. Debnath, is going to talk about it in the afternoon today. So one of the important things that we are learning is we need very good quality data sets, as Dr. Mathur also said, and train our models with good quality data. Otherwise, garbage in is garbage out. It's like, you know, if you're not going to teach your student properly, the student is not going to do well in the exam. Same applies to an AI model. So I think if the organizers are okay, we can take few questions from the audience. Is that okay? If you can pass the mic. I request whoever is asking the question to be very brief in your question. And if you can quickly come forward and ask the question, that will be helpful. Yeah, please, yes. You can come forward and please make your question brief. If there are others who want to ask, I request them to come forward and just wait here so the process can be a little more efficient.
Okay. Thanks a lot for great insights that you gave me today. I have a question either Mr. Rajiv or Mr. Rahul can answer because I have seen like you talking a lot about HMIS yourself. What I have seen, like whenever I go to any hospital, is that that HMIS is being used for billing and the rest of the services, but the data collection is actually not really being happening, or either it is in some way partial, like some information is sent there. So what I was hoping from, what I wanted to ask was that, is there any synergy between patient and doctor possible in this direction? Because I'm myself interested in that, and I'm working on that side.
Okay. Any of you want to take the question? Yeah.
I think Rahul has actually commented during his session, which is data entry as divorced from data capture, which happens when you do the work, will fail.
Yes.
So if the hospital, see, most of the HMIs, what I see is the doctor, the nurse, the pharmacist, they do their work, and then somebody goes and enters the data later. That system will fail. In fact, in Bangalore, I saw a good hospital, the KG hospital here, in which there also some bit of data entry happens, but a lot of the data actually gets captured in the lab and all data gets captured, not entered. So the answer to your question would be, if the data is linked to the business of the hospital or anywhere, that will be a reliable system. When it is entered later, the degree of transmission loss will be what happens in the electrical system. If the transmission system is good, loss will be less. Transmission system is bad, loss will be very high. I hope I have answered your question.
So I am actually specifically...
Okay, one question. Can we stick to one speaker?
It is regarding just I'm just a minute. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask that, let's say the patient eventually has that data with him whenever like he or she is going, and they need to keep it as well.
So
Okay,
I think that's a separate question.
No, but I can just quickly answer that. The push on under ABDM is about having the patient module itself, which didn't exist.
Yeah.
But Tamil Nadu and now going forward Kerala as well, two states are very actively having. Tamil Nadu, in fact, has already demonstrated in one district in Krishnagiri. I think it's a good model to see, where the patient is getting access to their own data, what is happening in the hospital, and patient, if going to the private sector to avail any services, they can voluntarily upload those records as well through the system. So when they go to the government system next time, that is available. So those efforts are in process, but it will take some time to reach at a universal coverage level.
Okay, one last question we will take, and I think I request you to meet the speakers in the lunch break so that we can move on to next session. Already we have somebody here. Yeah. Quick, if you can be quick. Yeah.
Sure. My question is on molecular data. So this is specifically to Dr. Mathur, that if you can comment on the quality of the molecular data and the up to the researchers who are generating the molecular data, how strict are you on depositing that for public good?
Okay. One last question, and then...
So as of now, the entire cancer registry is on voluntary data submissions. So we are in discussions with many systems which generate molecular data to submit, but the response has been very poor. So yes, that's a need, but I mean, there is no success story yet over there.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mathur.
Yeah.
Yes, one last question. Yes.
I'm Nilkant Poman from Pimpri Chinchwad Smart City. So this is related to the ICMR data when we are using it, the COVID vaccination. So the whole system that is to be developed by the researcher or this without domain expert, because the portal which access data district wise, and within a district there is an urban local body that is not considered, and the patient search is to be done by his residence address.
I think those are very specific questions which we may not.
Means this conference will be helpful
Yeah,
to
sure.
reduce this portion in next pandemic or next issue. So the database or data should also relate district, but also relate to the
Agreed.
ULBs.
Yes. Yeah, I think we will now stop with that. We have to all head for lunch. I want to thank all the panelists for giving very deep insights from their experience. Give them a big hand. I think our panelists were very honest in sharing their experiences on challenges as well as. So I really thank Center of Data for Public Good, Dr. Inder, Dr. Kalpana, Rakshit, and all of you for putting together such a fascinating conference. And thank you all, and have a nice lunch.